Bittensor, or the TAO token, has been crashing massively. We went from more than $500 down to a bit over $200 in the span of a few months. The question is, will this crash continue, or is this a buy the dip opportunity? In the end, crypto is all about buying low and selling high, and obviously TAO is not expensive right now. It looks like there's some kind of regularity to the pumps and dumps in the Bittensor price. Have a look at this. This is TAO relative to other altcoins, so the others market cap. We tend to bottom out at very similar levels, and once we reach that bottom, we can potentially rally by almost 200%. We've seen another rally of 85% here and of 100% here. Now, unfortunately, we are not yet at the absolute bottom. The negative momentum might continue for another 13% or so. So that's Bittensor relative to the altcoin market cap. Bittensor relative to Bitcoin, unfortunately, tends to underperform a bit more consistently. So that's this chart, Bittensor relative to BTC. Again, we are not yet at the absolute bottom. We might potentially fall by even 25% from here. But it's always a question of risk to reward. The potential upside just versus BTC is 65%, in the best case 180%. Now, why do we see this underperformance in the first place? It's probably because of the tokenomics. It's new tokens hitting the market, and unfortunately the staking program not being able to keep up with that supply expansion. Have a look at the number of circulating TAO tokens over time. Just in the last 2 years, we went from 6 billion TAO tokens to 11 billion. We almost doubled in supply. And here's a comparison of that supply expansion relative to how many TAO tokens are getting staked. So yes, the number of staked TAO is going up, but unfortunately it's not going up as quickly as the supply. So supply is in yellow, the staked TAO tokens is in green, and the delta here, it tends to grow over time. So more and more new liquid supply hits the market. And that's what's long-term depressing Bittensor relative to Bitcoin, potentially even relative to the rest of the altcoin market. I don't really like doing it, but that's how the YouTube game works. That's how the algorithm works. Please give this video a like if what you've seen so far has been useful. Thank you very much. That's why buying right now might be not worth the risk. It's probably better to wait until we've hit the support over here. So that could mean a Bittensor price of a bit under $200 if the altcoin market itself does not move. Now, they're not just tokenomics, there's not just the long-term price development. There's also short-term speculation on the asset, and that tends to happen with levered bets on the price via the perpetual futures market. Now, whoever wants to hold an asset long-term tends to just buy this on the spot market. But whoever wants to speculate on the short-term price action tends to take the perpetual futures, because the perpetual futures do have leverage, and the perpetual futures also have less trading fees. So getting in and out of an asset is easier with the perpetual futures. Holding an asset long-term is more expensive with perps, because holding an asset incurs all of those funding costs. So the funding costs are bad for long-term holding. They're okay for short-term trading. And so it's always interesting to see where actually the price discovery happens. In the last 24 hours, we only saw 12 million worth of trading volume on the spot market. But on the perpetual futures market, we saw more than 700 million worth of trading volume. So this is really where the price discovery happens. Interestingly enough, as with many altcoins, the 10th of October was a very significant event. Prior to that date, we tended to have a positive funding rate for Bittensor. Since that 10th of October, we tend to fluctuate around the zero line. So when this is positive, it means there's more longs than shorts. When this is neutral, then the dollars that are betting on rising or on falling prices is relatively balanced. Here is that 10th of October, 44 million worth of longs got liquidated. They lost all their money. And that's because the Bittensor price fell by 65% in a matter of a few hours to then partially recover again, right? This is when the market makers took advantage of those lower prices. But those market makers are now gradually offloading their holdings again. Now, there's some correlation between the amounts of bets on an asset and the spot price. So when there's more attention on an asset, when there's more bets on an asset, when open interest is high, then we tend to have also a high spot price. When then the amount of bets goes down, that's also when the spot price tends to go down. And so we see this in this chart here as well. But interestingly enough, we haven't yet come down to historical levels in terms of open interest. So there's more room to fall, which would then also depress the price further. The trading volume also has some correlation with the spot price, right? The spot price tends to be high when there's more trading. The spot price tends to be low when there is less trading. And right now we are still in a trend of falling trading volume, of negative momentum, of a falling spot price. So things are still risky. Bittensor might get cheap relative to the rest of the altcoin market, but that does not necessarily mean that the US dollar price is going up. It just means that it performs better than the rest of the altcoin market. If the altcoins in general come down, then Bittensor might simply just come down a bit less, and then the price bounces. So it's important to be delta hedged here. It's important to buy Bittensor only when it's cheap, and to buy this with a hedge versus the rest of the market, to potentially go short another altcoin, bet on falling prices of another altcoin, where maybe the tokenomics are even worse, where maybe the supply expands even quicker. Now let's look back. In 2025, the average Bitcoin investor pretty much got nothing. There were no gains, there were no losses, went slightly down by 8% roughly. The average altcoin investor, however, suffered much more. This is the performance of smaller altcoins in the last year. Many of them are down 70, 80, or even more than 90%. And that's really why sentiment is so bearish. It's most people owning many different altcoins, having a diversified portfolio of alts, and then underperforming massively, while other risk-on investments are actually doing fine. The Nasdaq 100, for example, appreciated this year. The problem really is that those smaller altcoins get hyped by influencers. YouTubers say that you should buy this small altcoin or that small altcoin. You're taking on much more risk than you should. And then in the end, you end up losing 50, 60, 70, maybe even 80% in the span of just a single year. If you used leverage, you probably already lost everything. This is the others market cap. And there was the flash crash on October 10th, where the average altcoin fell by 48%. So if you had leverage above 2x on any altcoin, you lost it all. And this was all just due to mispricing, right? We went back up quite quickly again. Those purchases, of course, had not been made by the average Joe. This was algorithmic trading. And now those algos are selling off their allocation over time as well. Many projects went from the billions of dollars, Bonk for example, to just a few hundred millions. 4 billion down to 600 million. Or here, SPX 6900 from 2 billion down to 400 million. Or over here, Fartcoin also above 2 billion. Now just slightly above 200 million, a drop of 90%. Or here, Dog with Head, 4 billion down to 300 million, a drop of more than 90%. Now, interestingly enough, you are still watching crypto content, so hopefully you haven't lost everything. But if you're just in Bitcoin and you have lost maybe 8% this year, that's not ideal either. It makes sense to change approaches, to not try to find the next 10 or 100x altcoin, because this is not the market to try to make those gains. Currently, the attention on crypto is very low, and it does need a lot of attention for those smaller altcoins to rally. This is not the time to buy those very risky bets. It's better just to focus on long-term compounding. Now, how many of those other YouTubers that you're following in crypto is actually willing to share their own data, their own performance data over time, since maybe starting to trade? I actually do not know a single one, but feel free to comment down below. I am willing to share my data though. This is my trading portfolio over time. This is a monthly chart, and this is going up for two reasons. It's going up because I regularly dollar cost average into that portfolio, but it's also going up because it outperforms just buying and holding Bitcoin. This year I did make money. So have a look at this. This is the monthly performance versus Bitcoin over the same time period. Every dot here represents how much I did better or worse compared to Bitcoin in that specific month. And what we see here as a dotted line, that's the 12-month moving average. Now, the overall average of all of those dots, that's 1.9%. So over the last 50 months, I have on average outperformed Bitcoin by 1.9% per month. Now, I don't just show this in order to brag. Of course, I do want to show my credentials here, but on the other hand, I also want to show how much volatility there is. There are some months where we underperform Bitcoin. There are other months where we outperform. The long-term average is what matters, and that's realistic. 1.9% per month is definitely achievable. The 10x or the 100x might be achievable with one position during a bull market with a specific lucky bet, but it's definitely not realistic long-term for an entire portfolio. And I don't just want to share my own performance. I also then started in July of 2025 a 5-month copy trading beta test. So every annual member of premium of this channel was able to deposit into that pool, and whatever trade I made was automatically reflected in the portfolio of the members. Now, this was a very actively managed project, and so here the outperformance versus Bitcoin is more than just 1.9% per month. But that's what diversification gives us, right? It gives us a bit more stability, but also muted returns. But here's where I think I'm different to all of those other influencers that only talk, but that don't really show their data, that don't really prove themselves in the market. If all of those influencers are so successful and they make those 10x returns so regularly, why don't they just open a similar kind of copy trading pool and then take a cut of the gains? The reason why they don't do this is because they don't outperform. They simply just make content on YouTube and then get some advertising money by YouTube or potentially even by individual crypto projects, right? Very often when those small altcoins get promoted, it's just because the influencer got a kickback from the project. By the way, I never took any money from any crypto project ever. I only have the premium membership of this channel. I have the affiliate link for Ledger. I've got the affiliate link for TradingView, so those are two tools, and I've got an affiliate link for Hyperliquid. That's a platform that I use myself where you can reduce your trading fees. But I've never taken any money from any project in order to promote that token. And so if you want to turn things around, if you want to start getting your money back again, you probably have to also follow a different approach. Now, I'm not a magician. I cannot see the future. This is not how I make this outperformance. I simply just ride the market structure. And the market structure for many altcoins is very disadvantageous for most retail investors. Very often the supply of an altcoin tends to grow over time. This here is the example of WorldCoin. But very often the demand doesn't grow as quickly as the supply. And that leads to underperformance. Every single week we've got roughly 700 million worth of unlocks. Bitcoin, on the other hand, has only 284 million worth of unlocks. So the altcoin market has unlocks that are roughly double the size of Bitcoin. Yet Bitcoin is more than 9 times larger in market cap compared to the altcoins. So we are looking at roughly 20 times the selling pressure relative to the market cap for the average altcoin relative to Bitcoin. This is why things like WorldCoin over time go down versus Bitcoin. That's why we see charts like this. This is WorldCoin relative to BTC. And so my approach is not trying to find the outlier here. When everything goes down that much because the early investors and the insiders sell, then I want to get part of that money as well. I am flipping this chart around, and then it looks like this. This is Bitcoin relative to WorldCoin. There's a way to get exactly that performance. Had you opened that position at the beginning of the year and you just held it until the end of the year, you would have made more than 300% return. Now, this is of course a positive example, and there is a lot of volatility in here as well, and there are ways to get stopped out. That's why I'm showing the actual realistic returns that are achievable, that I've achieved for the premium copy trading vault. And that's why I also share my alpha over Bitcoin for the entire crypto portfolio. 1.9% per month is realistic, but the right position can go up quite a bit. More than 300%. So there's really no need to try to find the next 10x meme coin. I have made several tutorials on this approach, how to set up the trades, how to do proper risk management, etc. And of course, I'm sharing my own trades as well. For example, over here, this is November 24th, where I entered a short on Pudgy Penguins. So I want to bet on relative valuations. We want to bet on one altcoin doing worse compared to another altcoin that might have high correlation to that alt. But more of the theory, of course, is explained in the videos. And so that's truly how I believe things can be turned around. It's not following the same kind of recipe, the recipe of disaster, but it's instead following the market structure. The odds are stacked against the regular retail investor that just buys an altcoin. Don't be like the average Joe. You want to have an edge in the market. So here's the premium membership. It's currently $125 per month. If you want to be part of the next copy trading pool and you simply just want to deposit your money and set and forget, and I then trade for you, then you might consider the annual membership. Those 17% were achieved over 5 months. If we annualize this, that's more than 40% after fees. So the break-even point is somewhere at around $3,000. That's for annual, if of course the prior returns will persist. That's a big if. Nobody knows if we can keep the performance. But again, I do think that we've got the odds on our side. If it's the first time here, feel free to subscribe. I publish this regularly. A like would be very much appreciated as well. It helps the channel grow. See you next time on YouTube or see you in Premium. Cheers.